Thanks for your company here on Lunchtime Agenda. Joining me now, David Coleman and Gabe Rotman for our political panel this afternoon. Thank you both very much for joining us. The government's giving part pensioners a $200 million funding boost through a change to the deeming rate. Now, that's the mechanism used to calculate income for pension payments and benefits. David Coleman, of course, we all want pensioners and part pensioners to have a better deal, but why now at a time when the government is still pushing the need for budget restraint, and also just a week after that leadership vote in the Liberal Party?
I think, David, this is an important recognition of the situation that part pensioners find themselves in. As you know, when interest rates go down, it's great for people with mortgages, but it's not so great for people on fixed incomes. And this is the government acknowledging that those people that have saved and have made a significant contribution to their retirement incomes do deserve some relief, especially in an environment of declining interest rates. So it's good news for part pensioners, and it'll certainly be welcomed in the community.
Gabe Rodman, it's only worth $3.20 per fortnight, I think it is, on average. It's still an improvement though, and do you welcome that?
Well, we welcome any assistance that's provided to pensioners that will help them deal with changes in the market. But our view is that the focus should really be on the millions of pensioners who are going to be affected by the government's changes to the indexation rates on to the pension, which is going to see pensioners, millions of pensioners, $80 a week worse off over a decade. And it's also been condemned by ACCOS in terms of, you know, what are the priorities here? Should there be the focus on these people who've got investments, or should it be on pensioners, millions of pensioners?
David, is that a fair criticism that the government is, if you like, giving pensioners $3.20, but then taking or trying to pass legislation that would see $80 up to $80 taken from them? No,
not at all, David. And I think, you know, let's get real about what is proposed in the government's plans for the age pension. So what is proposed that from 2018, after the next election, that pensions would increase by the rate of CPI. So increase by the rate of CPI. So that means however much prices go up in the shops, the pension goes up by just as much every 6 months. Now, that is a change that we are proposing to take account of the fact that we have immense debt, more than $200 billion now, heading towards $2/3 of a trillion if we don't act. And we think that that change is an appropriate and modest measure to help address this very difficult budget situation we face. But the key point, David, is that pensions go up every 6 months by CPI, which is the same amount that prices go up in the shops.
Yeah, what's wrong with that, Gabe Rodman? Because why not just keep pace with the inflation as it increases? Well,
because what it essentially means is that from the modelling that we've done is that pensioners are going to be $80 a week worse off over the next decade. So, well, yes, it is an indexation rate. It essentially means it's the lesser of two indexation rates which will see them worse off.
Okay, I want to turn to national security. We got a bit of a hint from the Prime Minister today and yesterday that he does, it seems, want to crack down on some of the areas where national security has been perhaps waning, perhaps where people have slipped through the net somewhat. This is what he said today.
I'm not going to preempt the statement that I'll be making next Monday, but if you look, for argument's sake, at the history of the Martin Place murderer, at every step of the way, our system gave him the benefit of the doubt. This was someone who really did bring nothing but discredit to himself and to our country. He, frankly, is a disgrace to everybody who came into contact with him, and we need to ensure that the system is at least as focused on Australia's national interest as it is on the interests of people from overseas who seek to come here.
Gabe Brodman, I'll start with you. Will Labor work in a bipartisan way with the government when it comes to this?
Well, we have worked in a constructive and bipartisan way so far on national security issues. We want to ensure that our national security agencies have the tools to be able to ensure that Australians are kept safe. But I mean, it was only announced on YouTube last night by the Prime Minister. We'll wait and see what the detail is next week.
Can you shed any more light on this for us, David Coleman? You were there with the Prime Minister when he made that statement.
Sure. Look, David, obviously I don't want to preempt what the Prime Minister is going to say next week, but what I would say is the fact that we face terrorism in Australia is a reality. I'm sitting now about 100 metres from the Limp Cafe, and we need to err on the side of protecting our citizens. There is, in these areas, always the debate about civil liberties and so on, but wherever there are things that we can sensibly do to protect our community, we should do so. And I know the PM's very committed to doing that, and I certainly support him 100%.
Your colleague Andrew Nikolic has written a piece today in The Australian where he pointed to countries like France, Britain and Canada that have tightened up laws and regulations, but they have huge problems. I mean, I'm not saying we don't, but are they really the models that we want to be following, particularly when you look to France, for example?
Well, look, I read Mr Nikolic's article and I thought it was a very thoughtful and well-researched piece. And again, David, I think that we need to be looking at all options, including how we address the issue of dual citizenship. What Mr Nikolic is advocating is a system where if somebody commits an act of terrorism, their dual citizenship to Australia is revoked. Now, the simple way of not getting yourself into that position to have your citizenship revoked is don't commit acts of terrorism. So I think that Mr Nikolic makes some important arguments, and I'm sure those will be taken into account in the coming weeks.
There are, Gabe Brodman, as you know, some laws, some treaties that we're part of when it comes to people being stateless. So if we're talking about revoking citizenship, it could only be those with dual citizenship. We can't tear up an Australian passport for a person who only has an Australian passport.
I think that just on that issue, let's wait and see what the Prime Minister actually puts on the table, what he discusses next week. I mean, I think that, again, we are constantly reminded of the volatility of the environment. We saw what happened in Copenhagen on the weekend, and the fact that it echoed so much of what actually happened in Paris was chilling. We condemn that, but we will wait and see what the Prime Minister has to say on next week. I understand it's Monday. That is the
on Monday.
It, yes.
Okay, I want to turn to Philip Ruddock and David Coleman. Your view on his treatment. Some in your party believe that he's been scapegoated after the result of the leadership ballot a week ago. What's your position?
Oh, look, this is a matter for the Prime Minister entirely. He chooses the team, he chooses his ministerial team and the Whip's team, and it's entirely appropriate for him to make those calls. Now, Philip Ruddock, of course, as the Prime Minister said in his statement on Friday, is a very deeply respected and revered member of our party, and it's appropriate to pay tribute to his service. Scott Buchholz, the incoming Whip, equally is a very well-liked and well-respected person in the party room. So, you know, this is a decision for the Prime Minister. He's made that decision, and that's entirely appropriate.
Sure, it is, but the Prime Minister also inferred that he wasn't as aware as he should have been, that the backbench wasn't entirely happy with him. Is that Philip Ruddock's fault, or is that his job to be passing that sort of information on to the Prime Minister as Chief Whip?
Oh, look, obviously, David, I'm not aware of the precise interactions between Mr Ruddock and the Prime Minister, but what I would say is that it's the Prime Minister's right to choose his team, and that's what he's done, and that's appropriate.
It is the Prime Minister's right to choose his team, Gabe Brodman. What is Labor's position on Philip Ruddock being dumped, and if you have an issue, why is that?
Well, we were shocked. I was shocked. The community was shocked. I know that my Canberra community was shocked about it. I know that many Australians were shocked by the decision, the fact that it was so late on a Friday night, and it seemed to be a surprise to Philip Ruddock. I mean, this is a man who is the father of the Parliament. This is a man who's 72 years old, who's been in Parliament for 40 plus years. I mean, there's not much that Philip Ruddock hasn't seen. So I think that, unfortunately, this esteemed and well-respected parliamentarian and gentleman, an absolute gentleman, has become the fall guy for the Prime Minister's inability to listen and consult with his backbench.
The PM, though, says he just wanted to renew his team. Yes, Philip Ruddock is very well respected. Yes, he's been here for more than 4 decades. But if you're trying to renew the team, would he not be the obvious choice?
Well, it is the prerogative. Our systems are very different. Labor's system of choosing the whip is very different to the Liberal and National Party system. But essentially, Philip Ruddock, this esteemed, well-respected individual Australian, has become the fall guy.
And it seems, David Coleman, that Tony Abbott, just to finish, is on something of a blitz this week of a number of electorates around the country. He was in yours earlier today. Is that welcome by MPs like you? Is that what Tony Abbott needs to do, be out there connecting with the community?
Oh, it's very welcome, David. I mean, yesterday and today the PM's been in my electorate. We had a morning tea for 100 people at Moortdale RSL yesterday, which was fantastic, and today at a local small business. So, yeah, it's terrific to see the PM getting out and about and meeting with people in communities, and he's certainly always very well received in my electorate.
Okay, we're out of time. David Coleman, Gabe Robin, thanks so much for joining us here on Lunchtime Agenda, and thanks for your company at home. I'm David Lipson. Ashley Gillen, of course,